Well, I think I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to help people see the systems that they take for granted,
Mm,
and I'm trying to encourage them to take action. And one without the other doesn't do you very much good.
beautiful. So is taking action making a ruckus?
If the action you are taking is generous and would be missed if you didn't do it, that's what I call making a ruckus. Making a ruckus is not having a tantrum. Making a ruckus is showing up with leverage to change the system for the better.
That, as you can probably guess from the title of this episode, is Seth Godin. And he's on a mission, encouraging us all to make a ruckus, to make a generous contribution to the world, to change the world for the better. Whether it's in one of his books, in his blog, or in this conversation that you're about to hear, Seth Godin always makes me think about things in new ways. Take, for example, Seth's answer to the first rapid fire question that I ask every guest. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Seth had the most unique answer to this question that I've ever heard. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Almost everyone I know is an introvert, and so am I.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Almost, do you think introverts are attracted to introverts?
No, I think that we evolved to be introverts because if you're in a tribe, a village, whatever, a group of nomads of 150 people, and you offend the chief, you don't get to sleep in the hut, and then you don't have grandchildren. That there's a lot of incentive to make your vulnerable social circle smaller and contained. That's why cocktail parties without alcohol don't work very well.
I never thought of it that way before. Did you? But you know what? Most of the smart guests that I interview tell me that they're an introvert. So maybe he's right. We're all evolving to be introverts. I guess I really am an anomaly. And now you know why cocktail parties without alcohol don't work very well. Are you keen to learn more from Seth? Let's do this.
Let's do this. Let's talk about talk.
Welcome to Talk About Talk podcast episode number 171, Making a Ruckus with Seth Godin. In this episode, you're going to learn what communication skills Seth thinks we should all be working on. You're going to learn a new definition of personal branding, and you'll learn why we all need to choose our genre, amongst other things. In case we haven't met, my name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki. Please just call me Andrea. I'm your executive communication coach. I coach executives like you to improve your communication skills so that you can communicate with confidence and clarity, establish credibility, and ultimately achieve your career goals. Sound good? To learn more about me and what I do, head over to talkabouttalk.com and you can read about the coaching and the workshops and all sorts of programs that I run. Plus, there are a bunch of free resources there for you at the bottom of the talkabouttalk.com homepage. Okay, let's get into this. I'm sure you want to hear from Seth. Here's how this episode's going to go. After I introduce Seth, we'll get right into the interview. And then at the end, I'm going to summarize with the 3 learnings that I want to reinforce based on our conversation. 3 things that I hope you'll take away and that I hope will help you in your own quest to make a ruckus. Seth has been on my radar since I was a brand manager early in my career, and I read his book called Purple Cow. That book is just one of his 21 books that have been bestsellers around the world and translated into more than 35 languages. He writes about the post-industrial revolution, the way ideas spread, marketing, quitting, leadership, and most of all, changing everything. You might be familiar with some of his books, including Linchpin, Tribes, The Dip, and of course, Purple Cow. His book, This is Marketing, was an instant bestseller around the world. And recently, he organized the all-volunteer community called the Carbon Almanac. In 2023, he wrote The Song of Significance, which is already a bestseller, and I strongly recommend it if you are a leader of any kind, or even if you seek to become one. I'm going to leave links to all of these books in the show notes. Yes, Seth is prolific. He also creates impact. His blog, which you can find by typing Seth into Google, is one of the most popular in the world, and his podcast is in the top 1% of all podcasts worldwide. In 2018, Seth was inducted into the Marketing Hall of Fame. I have to say, it would not be an exaggeration to tell you that Seth changed my life. In 2018, I read Seth's blog where he invited candidates to join the inaugural cohort of the Podcasting Fellowship. When I was writing my application for that program, I came up with the title for this podcast. I remember typing, "The topic of my podcast will be communication skills. So basically, my podcast is going to be Talk About Talk." Wait, I thought, that could be the name of the podcast. I checked the URL, and guess what? It wasn't taken, so I bought it pronto. Then I legally secured the trademark. And here I am, 6 years later, interviewing Seth. Yes, this is a moment for me. But back to Seth. In addition to his writing and his speaking, Seth also founded several companies, including Yoyodyne and Squid Do. More than 40,000 people have taken the powerful Akimbo workshops he founded, including the Alt MBA, the Marketing Seminar, and yes, the Podcasting Fellowship. I have to tell you this before we get into the interview. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Just ask my family. Anyway, one of my favorite episodes of all time that I've ever listened to is a relatively recent episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast where he interviews guess who? Seth Godin. Seth is irreverent, he's wise, and he's inspiring. And it was when I was listening to Seth provide advice to Tim Ferriss that I decided to finally ask Seth if I can interview him. So my goal here is to ask Seth new and different questions that I haven't heard him answer on other podcasts. Things like, do you think about your personal brand, Seth? And what do you think is the most important communication skill? Are you ready? Here we go. Thank you so much, Seth, for joining us here today to talk about making a ruckus.
Well, thank you for having me and for showing up hundreds of times. This podcasting thing takes a lot, and I appreciate you leading.
Oh, well, as I said, I know that your podcasting fellowship was a catalyst for me in making this happen. So I am very grateful for that. And even before the podcasting fellowship, Seth, I always thought that I had read most of your books. In the last couple of weeks since you agreed to do this interview, I did a little bit of research and I found a list of well over 80 books that you have written. And that list did not even include the Carbon Almanac or This Is Strategy.
Well, I didn't write the Carbon Almanac, but many of the books you're talking about are from my early career as a book packager. And if you're doing your job right as a book packager, you're not writing every word. Every book, beginning with Permission Marketing, I wrote every word. There are also books before that I wrote every word, but I don't have a team anymore. I used to have a team.
Ah, okay. I know I looked back at your bio and I saw that you were in the publishing space and I thought that explained some of it, but still.
No, it's a lot.
Seth, you are absolutely prolific. And I have a question for you about this body of work that you've created. The question is, how would you characterize or summarize or label what your body of work represents? And let's say your recent body of work, maybe since Purple Cow.
Well, I think I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to help people see the systems that they take for granted, and I'm trying to encourage them to take action. And one without the other doesn't do you very much good.
Beautiful. So is taking action making a ruckus?
If the action you are taking is generous and would be missed if you didn't do it, that's what I call making a ruckus. Making a ruckus is not having a tantrum. Making a ruckus is showing up with leverage to change the system for the better.
Okay. I hope I'm making a ruckus. That's very aspirational. A couple of months ago, I listened to one of my favorite interviews of you, which was, I think, a walk and talk that you did with Tim Ferriss. And I took some notes from that I wanted to follow up with you on. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is about, again, defining something, but you use the term genre. And I was wondering if you could share your take on genre.
Well, genre gets a bad rap because of generic, but they're not really related. Genre is essential at a bookstore because the mysteries have to be next to the mysteries and not mix in with the cookbooks. Because if you're going to buy a mystery, you want a book that's in the mystery genre. Now, that doesn't mean all mysteries are the same, but it means they rhyme with each other and they allow us to make predictions and to sort without wasting all of our time. So we can agree, I hope, that books have a genre, but so do charities, so do political causes, so do people we go on dates with, so do restaurants. If you go to an Ethiopian restaurant and they serve you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it might be a very good peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you're not happy because you went to an Ethiopian restaurant. And so with lots of people who I work with who are creatives, they seem to think it's a badge of honor to have no genre and to say this is for everyone. It's really important. And what I say to them is if you don't have a genre, you will be ignored.
Beautiful. So a lot of my work has evolved from focusing on improving communication skills to helping people identify their unique passions and expertise and superpowers, and I call it their personal brand, or in the context of executives, their professional identity. And one thing that really gets a lot of traction is helping people identify what their archetype is. People love being diagnosed, and then it's not that there's a better or a worse archetype. I think the power is seeing yourself and then understanding yourself and focusing and then being the best version of that you can be. I'm curious if you think about your personal brand, Seth.
Well, because I've been in the marketing business for a long time, I take the word brand very seriously. Tom Peters wrote the very first breakthrough article about personal branding in Fast Company exactly the same day that I wrote the first book on personal branding called Get What You Deserve.
Okay,
And
1997.
something like that. It was a long time ago.
97.
And what's a brand? A brand is a promise. It's what we expect from you. So a logo is not a brand. All the stuff you think is important is not a brand. Brand is what other people think you're going to do next. And so the story that I tell is Hyatt and Nike both have logos. But if Hyatt Hotels announced a line of sneakers, we have no idea what it would be like. But if Nike announced that they were going to open a hotel, we all know what it would be like. Because Nike has a brand and Hyatt doesn't. So most people have worked very hard to have a brand of, they do what you ask them to most of the time and you have to pay them.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Yeah. That, you go to see a podiatrist, the podiatrist is going to fix your foot, but that's it. That's their brand. It's not the clothes you wear. It's how do you act in a way that changes what people expect from you.
Right.
And a very personal, simple example is if you were coming to my house for dinner tonight, would I expect that you would be bringing a bottle of wine? Or would I expect that you would be ridiculously over the top and bring me this and this and this and this? And I'd be like, wait, what's going on here? This is too much. That could be your brand. Doesn't have to be a good thing. It could just be a thing. And so when we want to not be a commodity, an easily replaceable cog, we have to stand for something. And once you choose to stand for it, it helps to stand for it all the time.
Right. In all ways. You said it's not how you dress. Actually, I would say how you dress is one of the ways that you reinforce that brand, right? Do you agree?
It depends on whether you're a fashion designer or not. Let's say I need somebody to build a deck on my back porch. I don't care what they wear. And they may have a ridiculous article of clothing on. It probably won't affect what I was looking for when I was hiring someone to build the deck. So what you wear only matters to the extent, like these glasses I'm wearing, they're my logo. They're not my brand. That when someone is reading one of my blog posts or books, they're not saying, oh, I can hear the yellow glasses. No, that's not the case. The logo is just a signifier to, so it's me.
Interesting. I think a logo could be inconsistent with your brand though, right?
Of course. You can have a logo, this is a great experiment. Think really hard about two really well done logos. Okay? You got them in mind?
Okay. Yeah.
are they for terrible, terrible products?
No, they're for excellent products.
Right. Everyone always picks logos that they associate with excellent products. The fact is, the Starbucks logo is terrible.
Mm.
It's terrible. There's nothing good. It's hard to reproduce. People think she's naked, but maybe she's not, and her hair is a mess. And what is that? Right?
Yeah.
And the Starbucks name is terrible. It has the word bucks in the title for an expensive place. None of it makes sense. But people love the experience, so they've now decided they like the logo.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it is possible to slap an Irish logo on a great brand. But if you think about it, like Patagonia is one of my favorite brands. Their logo, it's memorable, but it doesn't match their brand.
True. True. So your previous comment reminded me of the famous quote from Jeff Bezos, where he says, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, right? It's really about your identity, which may or may not have something to do with the yellow glasses that you're wearing, right? Like when I think about Seth, I picture you in yellow or orange glasses, right? And sharing expertise about how to make a ruckus.
Well, I would argue that my brand is different than my logo because most of the time, if people have me show up in the room, they expect me to do two things. One, say something that is both true and surprising at the same time.
Yeah.
And two, be pretty kind.
Mm.
And there are plenty of people in my line of work who are not kind. And there are plenty of people in my line of work who say things that are not surprising. So I am distinguished from those people by those two things.
I love that. I love that. That's like the intersection. I was just listening to This Is Marketing for at least the second time, maybe the third time. And you talk about what's on the X axis, what's on the Y axis, right? And plotting. And I even do this actually with my clients when we're talking about their archetypes. And I used to say, identify the one archetype that represents you. And now it's like the intersection of two can often be at least as
Sure.
powerful. I think that's a huge insight. I mean, the consultants would be laughing at us, right? Like, of course, it's a 2x2. It's always a 2x2. But
And consultants
okay.
are always laughing at us.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. So I want to shift into communication a little bit. So this podcast, Talk About Talk, is really targeted to growth-minded executives who are trying to grow their career, and they have this idea, this epiphany that communication skills are going to help them get there, right? Based on your observations and conversations, what communication skills do you think are the most important? Maybe it could be that they're the most lacking, but the most important communication skills that we should be focusing on.
I think the biggest problem most people have is they don't actually want to communicate.
Mm.
So semiotics is the science of flags and signals.
Yep.
If you can watch a movie with the sound turned off and understand what's going on, it's a pretty well-made movie because the symbols and the signs are expressing themselves.
Right.
If you get on an airplane and someone who works there is pointing with that two-finger point in each direction, in whatever language they're talking, exactly what they're doing. You know it by heart. But lots of times we're hiding. We are talking, but we are hiding because we don't actually want to be seen because it's scary to be seen. We don't actually want to make a point because then we'd have to be responsible for it. So that's why when you call a big company and they have all this gobbledygook that they just said to you on the phone, instead of just saying, yeah, it's broken, right? Because they don't want to say, yeah, it's broken. And so the hardest part for me, when I see people who have trouble communicating, I think the hardest part is people don't actually want to be heard. So they're afraid to directly say what they mean.
Wow. Okay. That answer blows me away. Let me tell you, the typical answer that I hear is, oh, it's confidence, or oh, it's precision, or oh, it's storytelling. One answer to the question that gets a lot of traction also is listening. And I thought that's where you were headed at first, right? We think we're communicating, but we're not really communicating because we're not listening. And you're saying, no, it is actually about amplifying what you're saying, but it's almost like they're afraid to put their stake in the ground.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oof. Okay, I'm gonna do some thinking about that. I was just listening to a new book called Executive Presence 2.0, where the author talks about Sylvia Ann Hewitt. She talks about how the three ingredients to executive presence are communication skills, gravitas, and showing up. And people that have these things and have exceptional executive presence are the people who put their stake in the ground and say what they mean and back it up. They make the tough decisions. So it
Yeah.
sounds
And
like
I think it's very important to realize that there are 8 billion people on Earth. Nobody is for everything. No one is for everyone. You
right.
need to find your people. So I don't go to Paul Weber's anymore because Weber sells hamburgers. I haven't had meat in 40 years. I can't even smell the place, right? And if I said, Paul Weber, you got to stop doing that. Start serving kale milkshakes instead, made with oat milk. They should appropriately say there's a place 5 miles up Highway 11. You can go,
Right.
we don't do that here.
Yeah.
And a key part of communicating is I'm speaking to people who speak this language, who want to go in that direction, who believe this sort of thing. And if you're not one of those people, you might be in the wrong room.
So that relates to another topic that I wanted to ask you about, this, I don't know if it's tension or integration maybe between authenticity and consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you, Seth, define these terms and then talk about how they're the same and different from each other and how people may confound them.
Yeah, I have a whole rant about authenticity, as you know.
Yeah.
Um, you and I do not know each other well. So I have no idea if you're having a good day or not because you're a professional. If you were showing up authentically and your cat had just thrown up behind the refrigerator and their, crank collar just bothered you and you had athlete's foot and you were cranky about all those things, I wouldn't like you more because I came to the podcast to talk to a professional. Professionals are consistent. They're not authentic. We want a consistent doctor. We want a consistent Customs and Border Patrol agent. We want a consistent gas station attendant. We don't want to have to guess every time we see, because we're not their friend. We are engaging with them on a transaction. So, yeah, I'd like my friends to be authentic with me. I can call my friend Lisa in Italy and she will tell me her truth. But if you're not my friend, please just be consistent.
Mhm. So during COVID and after COVID, there was this phrase going around, should we bring our whole selves to work?
Mm-hmm.
And I replied to some of these articles and said, I hope we don't bring our whole selves anywhere. Right?
Yeah.
That sounds consistent with what you're saying. So, but back to this so consistent professionals need to be consistent, and authenticity you're equating with full transparency. And so we don't want that. Is that right?
Well, even partial transparency. We started by talking about brands. Is Nike consistent, right? Nike isn't going to sell you a 3-inch heel, and they're not going to sell you something that breaks in a week. Because if they did that, their brand would fall apart. Maybe they authentically feel like doing that because they would make some money.
Mm-hmm.
That what we want is to build something that even if the logo wasn't on it, people could tell we did it. Well, the only chance of that is if it's consistent. Now, the exception, which social media has amplified, are divas, rock stars, and people who get paid for throwing a tantrum. Those people are supposed to be authentic, but guess what? They're faking it. They're consistently being fake authentic, right? They're having tantrums all the time because, like, maybe Bob Dylan feels like being eloquent and singing in a way that we can understand, but he can't because he has to be consistently authentic as a mumbler.
Mm. Yeah, I love this. I interviewed an academic from the US on the archetypes of female pop stars. And she was talking about this, you go from like the innocent girl and then you rebel and you go through these stages and oh my goodness, but you need to consistently conform or show up consistently as that, hot mess or as that diva, right?
Yeah. And that's what killed Amy Winehouse, right? Like, and there's a lot of misogyny, there's a lot of family trauma. But the fact is that if you make a reputation as a diva who's living right on the edge, you might not make it to 27.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Wow. So be careful what you're conforming to, what archetype, if you want to use the term archetype, or what persona or what brand or what genre you're
Right. And
conforming to.
this rubs people the wrong way because they think it's fake. But is it fake that a surgeon's wearing a mask and the rubber gloves and standing like this in front of you before they do surgery? Right. The fact is that when you put on the uniform, you become the professional. And the word uniform is the word uniform for a reason.
Yeah. So I'm curious about your take about transparency at work. Like, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business
Sure, of
School,
course.
right? And she talks about psychological safety and creating an environment where it's safe to take risks. And she encouraged leaders are the folks that create the culture, so
Mhm.
they can't allocate the adoption of psychological safety. They need to create it themselves. And one way they do that is by being vulnerable, admitting mistakes, and so on. And the term authenticity shows up a lot here in this body of work. So how do you
Okay.
reconcile that?
So let's break this into pieces a little bit.
Yeah.
If you are consistently creating culture in an organization by doing things like admitting mistakes, acknowledging that you're not infallible, you're not being authentic doing that. You are being consistent doing that.
True.
You are showing up to do it even when you don't feel like it. Even when you're like, oh, I can't believe they need me to tell that story again. It embarrasses me but you tell it anyway, right? That is consistent. So if Amy is writing down steps, she's encouraging people to be consistent. She's not encouraging them to say whatever the hell pops into their head.
That's right.
The key for me about transparency at work is let's get real or let's not play, which is a simple sentence that means we're going to agree on what things are like around here, and we're going to agree on where we are going. If you don't want to buy into that, I get it. Here's a severance package. You are welcome to leave. But we're going to agree that that's what things are like around here.
Right.
And then we can be honest with each other about whether we're accomplishing that. So my friend Danny Meyer owns a bunch of restaurants. He started Shake Shack. If you work for Danny Meyer at one of these restaurants, we don't have to revisit on a regular basis why people are coming to spend $100 for dinner.
Right.
And we don't have to regularly revisit why we fold napkins. I know you don't fold napkins at home, but we fold napkins here because we're putting on a show. And if you're grumbling about that, if you're grumbling about the systemic income inequality that leads it so that people can come buy a $200 bottle of wine, I get that. That's totally legit. But the show we put on here, that's at the center of it. So let's get real. This is what we do. This is a game. And I get to say to you, that napkin wasn't folded properly. And I'm not attacking you. And I'm not making a personal statement. I'm talking about the napkin. And if we can't agree on what the napkin's supposed to be, then we can't work together.
Love it. Okay. I have a boot camp that I'm running after this interview, and I'm going to be talking to folks a lot about consistency. I love this. Okay, I want to shift to a different element of communication, and that is brevity, conciseness, precision. I know you have a very famous short blog, the shortest blog. What was the shortest blog you ever wrote?
You don't need more time. You just need to decide.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. In fact, you've already made the decision, so just do it. Right? Back to Nike. Just do it. So I recently read Brevity. Is that what it's called? The book by the Axios founders. Smart Brevity, it's called.
Okay.
Yeah, highly recommend that book.
I hope it's not too long. And I probably would have just named
They take
I probably would have just named the book brevity. I'm not sure they needed the word smart. So right there, I cut it in half.
Yeah.
But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, they could have cut it. No, it's very meta. They use all the principles that they're teaching in the book in the communication of the book itself. So I have this theory that a lot of people think they're being generous with the volume of information that they're sharing. I know that I did early on, when 6 years ago, when I started blogging and podcasting, I thought the more I shared, the better. And so I have this new theory that if you really want to be generous, you do the work to sharpen the message, to make it more concise, more brief, so that it's easier for other people to understand. Does that sit well with you?
I'm always in favor of people doing the work, but let me challenge the concept
Okay.
of brevity the way many people understand it. Nordstrom's founders and employees frequently tell a story of a guy who was working at the tie counter at Nordstrom's, men's ties. And a 75-year-old man comes in with 2 snow tires.
I knew you were going to say that.
And he puts the snow tires down on the desk and he says, I bought these here. I don't need them. I need a refund. And the person who's working at the counter reaches into the cash register, hands the guy $300 and says, thank you. And he leaves. And part of the punchline is Nordstrom's doesn't sell snow tires. This story, which I'm happy to explain it, but I don't need to. This story is told because it is way longer than always give people a refund. But it works better than saying always give people a refund.
True.
Because stories stick with people. So brevity actually means as short as possible, but not shorter. I used to know a kid who was really young. He said, it's simple. The boy cried wolf and the villagers didn't come. That's it. You can't tell that story more briefly than that.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you about your upcoming book. This is Strategy. Very cleverly and simply titled, consistently with your previous book, which I told you I'm rereading right now. This is Marketing. Can you share I know it's coming out in October. I can't wait to get my hands on it. Can you share a little bit about that book?
There aren't any books on strategy I've ever been able to recommend because they're not really about strategy. There are big, thick books for MBAs. There are books for generals, but mostly there are books of tactics. And strategy is a philosophy of becoming. Strategy is deciding what work to do today to get the results we seek tomorrow. Strategy is about systems and games and time and empathy. Yeah. And an elegant strategy is a path that gets better as we go. And most people, small companies, big companies, nonprofits, political campaigns, embassies, do not have an elegant strategy. They're constantly pushing uphill. They're constantly insisting that the world align the way they want it to align. And the thing is, good waves make good surfers. So first we got to look for the right wave. First, we've got to understand how the world is structured, and then the change we seek to make in that context, not insisting that the whole world rearrange itself because it's unjust.
So that's the systems thinking that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I read a summary and I thought if I had to choose the two things that this book is about in terms of strategic thinking is systems thinking and longer term. I think you just said it. You said it's about what are we doing today to plan to succeed tomorrow, something like that.
So longer term might just be one day, and it might be 100 years. Okay. That people who listen to podcasts like this love curves and graphs, the long tail, the crossing the chasm, the Gartner hype cycle, and all of them go like this, right? But we forget that the axis on the bottom is time, right? Time is nature's way of making sure everything doesn't happen all at once. And so we do something today and we have 3 customers, but we get traction that gets us to 9, and then we get traction that gets us to 81. But if we start today and don't get 81, that doesn't mean we failed. And if we start today and hustle trying to skip 3 and 9, we'll never get to 81. That we are planting seeds, we are watering, fertilizing, we're gardeners. And if you go to the wrong soil or you use the wrong seeds, it's not going to grow.
So recently I interviewed Roger Martin, who was actually my boss. He was the dean at Rotman when I was on the faculty there. And he is also a prolific thought leader, and he has the most downloaded video at Harvard Business Review called "A Plan is Not a Strategy." And I was listening carefully when you were talking about your book. You did not use the word plan, but it sounded an awful lot like a plan.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go find that video. I've never seen it. Roger's a big brain, so I can't wait to see it. Yesterday, I changed the subtitle of my book. The subtitle used to be "Creating the Conditions for Change." And that's what the book's about. But I don't think that's on brand for me consistently, because it's a little too hard to understand. So I changed it to "Make Better Plans."
Oh, wow. Oh, I can't wait to hear what you say about his video.
Well, I need to watch it right away because it's not too late for me to change it back. So we'll see what he has to say.
Amazing. I'm going to send it to you right when we're done here. I'm also going to put it in the show notes. Okay. So one last thing before we get to the 3 rapid fire questions that I can't wait to also ask you is, did you happen to read Arthur Brooks, one of his recent books called "From Strength to Strength"?
I did not.
Okay. So let me tell you the one graph in this book that to me is basically the thesis of the book. On the x-axis, you have time. And on the y-axis, you have some sort of output that humans have over their lifetime, right?
Right.
And so he talks about how, as ambitious, smart, well-intended folks, we jump on this curve in our career, and it's about productivity and output and status and getting promoted and all these things. And at some point we hit cognitive decline, and it's earlier than we all think. It's in our 40s. So I'm well past that. And then many of us, especially the ambitious folks, keep fighting for, dominance, for productivity, for all these things. And it gets harder and harder, often to the detriment of our physical health, our relationships, and our life in general, right? And what he advocates is that we jump to a second curve where instead of being productive, the output is sharing our wisdom. And when I read this, I was like, this perfectly described. It was very validating for me, right? Because I used to be a brand manager at Kraft, and I was working really hard. And then I went and I earned my degrees, and I was on a faculty member. And then I jumped off. I started Talk About Talk, and I'm sharing wisdom. And I find it incredibly fulfilling, all the things that he talked about. And then I thought, I think Seth has been doing this from the beginning.
Well, I am not a role model for anything except maybe not eating hamburgers. But sharing wisdom is a broad statement, right? That I happen to be in a line of work where my words are on a piece of paper, and sometimes people pay money for them. But, if I think about the AC heating contractor down the street, who's my age, he has apprentices and people coming up into business. He spends a good chunk of his time teaching those people how to install air conditioning. That's wisdom as well. So I don't think that what Arthur is saying is that everybody should become a pundit.
No, I don't think he is either.
Right.
No, no.
I'm not saying you were saying that. I'm clarifying for me, right? That what we have is the chance, I spend almost all my time helping nonprofits and people I care about for free figure out what they ought to be doing. And I don't do that in public because that's not my brand. I do that because that's my craft, my work. And I've been doing that for a while. I couldn't do it when I was 35 because no one would trust me to do it. And so what's really happening is it's not the internal thing of physical or cognitive decline. It's the asset value of the benefit of the doubt. And as we gain the benefit of the doubt, I think we have leverage to amplify our insight. And even if we live to 200, it feels to me like it's a good use of your time long before you have to worry about whatever's going to happen to you next.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. So it's not just that you're shifting your idea of what's on the y-axis, right? It's that over time you accumulate more wisdom to share. And back to branding, maybe a reputation for
Yeah,
credible wisdom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Woo! Beautiful. Oh my goodness. I love that. You are going to be so quoted on that, Seth. Are you ready for the 3 rapid fire questions?
They're all rapid fire the way my brain works. What do you got?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to share with the listeners that, like all of the people that I interview for my podcast, once I said to Seth, once we book the interview, I'm going to share some of the ideas that I have for questions. Definitely going to go off script. And you replied to me and said, I don't want the questions. I love that. I love that you don't want the questions. So first rapid fire question, first official rapid fire question is, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Almost everyone I know is an introvert, and so am I.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Almost, do you think introverts are attracted to introverts?
No, I think that we evolved to be introverts because if you're in a tribe, a village, whatever, a group of nomads of 150 people, and you offend the chief, you don't get to sleep in the hut, and then you don't have grandchildren. That there's a lot of incentive to make your vulnerable social circle smaller and contained. That's why cocktail parties without alcohol don't work very well, because people get there and they don't know what or why to engage, right? So when I'm doing my work, I am eagerly showing up for other people the same way a swimmer is swimming as fast as they can. But that doesn't mean that in their spare time, the swimmer is swimming as fast as they can just for
Right.
fun. So I regularly, I have no one in my office. I have no employees. I can go 12 hours without seeing another person quite happily.
Oh, not me, but that's okay. That's okay. All right, next question. What are your communication pet peeves, or a pet peeve that you have when other people are communicating and you wish they would change the way they're communicating?
Well, peeves make lousy pets because they're hard to keep. But with that said, it hurts me when I see someone who is on a useful, righteous path undermining their work
Mhm.
by falling into common traps. And it could be something as simple as regularly I will hear people on an interview use ums and uhs to stop person from taking the mic back. That's not a hard problem to fix. It's 4 days of work. And that's a trivial one. On a bigger scale, much bigger, much more important, much more common scale, marketers, particularly people with a personal brand in quotation marks, hustle too much. They interrupt too much. They hassle too much. They try to get the word out. I think getting the word out is a ridiculous mantra. It's not effective, and it undermines everything you're trying to do.
I know you talk about that a lot in This Is Marketing. Yeah. Okay. The last rapid fire question. I'm really curious, given the bookshelf behind you. Is there a book or a podcast, not one of yours and not one of mine, a book or a podcast that you find yourself recommending a lot lately?
Okay, so the best podcast ever made was Mystery Show, episode 3. Starley only made 6 episodes. Don't start with episode 3. Start with episode 4, episode 2, but you should listen to Mystery Show, episode 3.
Mystery
That
show?
Mystery Show. It in each episode, she solved the mystery.
Okay.
Um, she was terrific, but the problem was she tried to make one a week and it needed to be one a year. And if it was one a year, there's no way she could have made it work. Anyway, I listened to History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs. I'm up to the current episode, which is 189. And that's a lifelong project for Andrew. It's going to outlive me for sure. 99% Invisible is nothing but wisdom, wisdom, wisdom.
Okay.
Roman is a superstar. My friend Brian's podcast, The Moment, highly recommend it. I used to listen to Dan Carlin's history podcast. They're a miracle. After a while, it's too much Genghis Khan was too much Genghis Khan for me, so I took a break. Who else we got? And then the best audiobook ever recorded is Just Kids by Patti Smith.
Okay. I am going to put links to all of those in the show notes, and I'm going to definitely listen to all of them myself. Is there anything else you want to share, Seth, with the Talk About Talk listeners about how they can effectively make a ruckus?
Big problems demand small solutions. Find one person. Find a tiny pocket of a system. Find someone who is lonely and begin there. Do not wait for the Pope to call you and put you in charge of solving something giant. We build things that are small, we gain traction, and then we do it again.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate you sharing your time and all of your insights with us. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Keep making this ruckus. It matters.
Did you get that? Don't wait for the Pope to call you and put you in charge of something. Thank you, Seth. Personally, I am inspired to take action and go make a ruckus. Now, I'm going to quickly summarize with 3 of the themes or learnings that I want to reinforce for you. But first, I want to share with you a few things that Seth said that I'm not sure I agree with. I'm really curious what you think. The truth is, I'm still thinking about these things, which is what I love. As I said at the beginning, Seth always leaves me thinking. The first thing I'm not sure I agree with is how Seth said that how you dress is not your brand, it's your logo. Remember when I asked, how you dress is one of the ways that you reinforce your brand. Do you agree? Here's his response.
It depends on whether you're a fashion designer or not. Let's say I need somebody to build a deck on my back porch. I don't care what they wear. And they may have a ridiculous article of clothing on. It probably won't affect what I was looking for when I was hiring someone to build the deck. So what you wear only matters to the extent, like these glasses I'm wearing, they're my logo. They're not my brand.
I think how you show up, including how you dress, is a significant part of your brand. The second point where I'm not sure whether I agree with Seth was when he said, professionals are consistent. They're not authentic. I understand this point about professionals being consistent, and I agree. But I think things are changing in terms of authenticity. More and more, respected leaders with strong personal brands are sharing parts of their personal life, their humanity, and their vulnerabilities with others at work. They're encouraging others to also be themselves and not conform. Of course, you have to be dependable, accountable, and trustworthy. Again, I'm curious, what do you think? Is it true that professionals are consistent and they're not authentic? As you can see, like I said, Seth makes me think. Okay, now I am going to share the 3 themes with you that I want to reinforce from this episode. Here they are. The first is based on Seth's answer to my question, what communication skill should we all work on? His answer was something that I never expected. He said, quote, the biggest problem most people have is that they don't actually want to communicate. Wait, what? I thought he would say that we're too verbose or that we lack confidence, but no. Seth identifies that many people struggle with communication because they're actually afraid to be seen or to take responsibility for their messages. This fear leads to evasive or unclear communication. And I think he's right on that one. Take a stand, people. The second theme I want to reinforce is about genres. Like books have genres, so too do people. He said he works with lots of people who think it's a badge of honor not to have a genre. He talks about the importance of genre in helping people categorize and predict experiences, whether it's a book, a restaurant, or your personal brand. Most importantly, he highlighted that if you don't have a genre, you will be ignored. So again, take a stand. Choose a genre. The third and last theme that I want to reinforce is Seth's definition of personal branding. I am definitely going to use his definition in my coaching. Remember Jeff Bezos' definition. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Seth's got a slightly different take that I think is at least as compelling. Your brand is what other people think you're going to do next. So ask yourself, what do people think you're going to do next? That is your brand. I love it. Okay, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I just can't wait to read Seth's upcoming book called This is Strategy. I'm sure he'll have a new take on strategy that I hadn't considered before. Now, I leave you with this. If the action you're taking is generous and would be missed if you didn't do it, that's what Seth calls making a ruckus. Making a ruckus does not mean having a temper tantrum. Making a ruckus is showing up with leverage to change the system for better. So let's all make a ruckus. All right, that's it. That's everything for this episode. Thanks again to Seth for sharing his thoughts and for encouraging all of us to make a ruckus. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll refer it to one of your friends. And I also hope you'll leave a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Now, go make a ruckus and talk soon.